Welcome to the Toronto Real Estate Podcast, where we peel back the layers of the city's vibrant community, one story at a time. Today, we're taking a savory detour to explore the connection between culture, cuisine, and community in the heart of downtown Toronto. Join us with a very special guest, Joe Mercurio, the passionate mind and soul behind the iconic Bar Mercurio, a culinary gem. If you have not been there, tucked in at the bustling corner of Bloor and St. George in the Annex proper. Since opening its doors in 1997, Bar Mercurio has become more than just a restaurant. It's a testament to a family's fierce dedication to sharing a rich culinary experience deeply rooted in time, culture, and history. Today, Joe will take us on a journey from the inception of Bar Mercurio to its status as one of Toronto's institutions, sharing insights into the challenges and triumphs of running a restaurant, the impact of external factors like COVID-19, food prices and inflation, and the always changing restaurant scene in Toronto. So pull up a chair and join us as we dive into the story of Bar Mercurio, a place where every dish tells a story and every guest certainly becomes part of the family. My name is Kori Marin, and I'm a broker and co-founder of Fox Marin. My co-host today is Mr. Ralph Fox, broker of record and co-founder of Fox Marin, and of course, our special guest, Joe Mercurio, a restaurateur, artist extraordinaire, avid cyclist, and family man. We're so delighted to have you here. Joe, welcome.
Thank you. I almost want to go home after that introduction.
Well, it's great to have you here. We're so happy. This is a long overdue conversation.
Well, thank you for having me both. I love what you do.
Yeah, in actuality, we've had so many conversations at your restaurant. This is just an extension of one of those conversations. And it's so great that we get to share this with anybody who's tuning in today. Joe, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. As Kori read that extensive bio on you, the word that really struck out to me is heart. You're a man with a lot of heart that definitely comes through, not just in conversation, but in translation at your restaurant. You, in our humble opinion, definitely have the best pizza in Toronto, amongst much other things on the menu, which is ever changing and evolving. And dinner would never be the same without coming to your restaurant, sitting at the bar, and having you just bring a random glass of wine to us. So great to have you here and get to know a little bit more about you and get to ask you maybe a bit more direct questions about your history and how, I don't think we've ever gotten into the history of how you opened your restaurant, how Bar Mercurio came to be. So it'd be just awesome if you could give us a little bit of background about the inception of your restaurant and how Bar Mercurio came to be.
Well, thank you again for having me, and I would love to. So basically, I went to U of T following a degree in economics, and I loved the area. I loved the area so much that I told a real estate agent while I was sitting at a wedding next to him that I wanted to open a location between St. George and Bloor, St. George and Harvard and Spadina and Bloor. And I'm not exaggerating. I gave him those exact details. He calls me 2 months later. I have a spot for you, which is where I am now. It took about 9 months to sign the deal because I was just a 29-year-old, big heart, and that's about it. And the landlord needed a bit of security. I convinced the landlord, and here I am at Bar Mercurio.
I have to interject, maybe a little bit of stubbornness too.
Yeah, you're being very modest. I think there's a lot of stubbornness. It took 9 months to sign the lease. I had to convince the landlord that it wasn't just my stubbornness in my heart, that I kind of knew what I was doing. And for some reason, the landlord believed me.
Yeah, amazing.
And there I am at Bar Mercurio. I'm 29 years old. So I buy a coffee shop. It was called Cafe Jaya. It was a coffee shop that you would find in most medical buildings. They had little refrigerators. I learned in that coffee shop what a rice pudding was. Because you open your little refrigerator, you grab your rice pudding, you put it on a tray, you proceed down the line, you go and you take your Jell-O, you pour your own coffee, you sit down, just like a classic cafeteria. I took this restaurant, and it was 1997, and we renovated on weekends. On Friday night at 6 o'clock, I would close the door. I had a construction crew come in. Friday night, Saturday, Sunday night, call all the family, clean up. Monday morning at 7, we serve coffee. I did this for over a year.
Wow.
Amazing.
And a year later, we opened up Bar Mercurio. People were coming in. I had an architect firm next to me called the Young and Wright. They would come in every morning, and every morning all the architects would look around to see, what did you do now? And the big change came when I moved the kitchen from the front, where you now sit at the bar, to the back, and moved the bar from the back to the front. And I completely disoriented them. It was an incredible day. I still remember they came in and they didn't know what to do, and Bar Mercurio just started.
Amazing. And tell me about the restaurant business. Like, what inspired you to get into the restaurant business? I know you have a degree in economics.
Mhm.
Restaurants have a very, very, very high rate of failure. Obviously, you have success and thrive through all types of different economies. And you've definitely done a great job from a business perspective. But what was it that led you to want to go into the business and thinking that with such a high rate of failure that you were going to be the one exception and actually make it?
Well, I can tell you what's important is that I can only answer that question now. Now, meaning at, if you will, at this part of my journey in the industry, I would not be able to have answered this question if you had asked me 25 years ago. So that's important for me to say that. Having said that, the reason why I'm in the industry is because, and I'm probably not unique in this sense. I know I'm not unique. Food was the first language for me and it's the way you express everything. It's the way you express I like you. And it's the way you express the opposite. I don't like you. And I didn't know that at the time. And so that's the first thing. And it was a way of communicating with people. And I love communicating with others. So food is my way in which I communicate.
And I guess in your restaurant, the way your restaurant is situated, it really gives you the opportunity to communicate with your patrons, right? Like, it's a great way to open a conversation, and it's a great way to get to know somebody.
And out of sheer luck, in terms of where I am, and perhaps I use this word very loosely, luck, because luck doesn't really exist. I can share it because I'm in an incredibly vibrant community,
100%.
which we can talk about other things because can we communicate with others? I've always felt I could communicate at least with what I do, and then it morphed into other communications because you communicate at large with people, not just with food. And I think this is interesting, this whole communication.
Well, tell me a little bit more about that.
When I started in 1998, Joanne Cates, who was the food columnist at the Globe and Mail, comes into my restaurant, and again, out of luck, she says, "This is a great restaurant." Because she made that pronouncement, writes a few paragraphs, Bar Mercurio takes off. We had an authority. Joanne Cates was the authority. She told people read her column and tested her out. There are no more authorities. What we have now are, what I've learned recently, are influencers on social media, and people tell other people where to go. So we don't have that authority. And for me to communicate with everyone at large, it gets really challenging, because there's almost a subset of different groups out there. And how do I tell them what I do? I was lucky when I came that I didn't have to tell them. Joanne Cates did that for me, and then they walked in my door, and they liked it or didn't, and they came back or not, and that's great. Now I have to communicate with all these communities out there, and it's challenging. I like challenges.
Well, one thing I love about your restaurant, and we've been going to your restaurant for over a decade, and the way we discovered it is that one of my former colleagues invited me to dine there and sit at the bar, in fact. And we don't live very far. We actually, in fact, can walk to Bar Mercurio. And I didn't know it was there. It's sort of like this tucked away little gem nestled into the annex. And she invited me there. We had an exceptional time. We sat at the bar. You served us great wine. It was just such a magical night. I'm like, Ralph, we have to come back to this restaurant together. You have no idea. a neighborhood restaurant, a place where people talk to the people next to them, you talk to the staff, people are having debates at the bar and having interesting discussions. And what I love about the restaurant is that it's not necessarily that you need a big Instagram following or influencers to dine there. It seems like word of mouth. And that every time we go back, there's people that are repeat visitors that we actually know from dining there so often. So it's almost, I kind of like that it's protected that way. And only people with magic key get in, and the people that just know about this institution being there versus it being a grand scale restaurant where all the trendy people go to. I kind of like that it's protected that way, but that's my perspective on it.
And I agree with what you said. So while it's true that for me, the most important thing, and again, I understand this more now than in the past, is to let people be whoever they are and order more or less what they want and provide but set a very comfortable place.
Yes.
So you can literally, hopefully relax. And the test of that is you coming in and feeling, do I feel relaxed in this place? And so that's very important. And whether I succeed or not is a question mark. I try to aim at that. For the second part of what you said, I would agree with what you said pre-COVID.
Okay.
Things have changed dramatically post-COVID. My clientele pre-COVID was elderly, educated, and relatively wealthy. Now I'm generalizing, obviously. Anyone that's educated, elderly, and wealthy post-COVID, their behavior in terms of spending and patterns of spending have all changed. So if they were downtown 5 days, they're there less. If they were going by their favorite bar after work once a week, they're going less. If they shopped online once a month, they're shopping online more than once a month. Their behavior has changed. And when you distill it down, my patrons have changed as well at large. And so everything is quite different.
Interesting. Like, I'm listening to elderly, wealthy, and educated, and I'm wondering what Kori and I are doing at your bar. But we'll do our best to help with the changing demographics, I guess.
I'm generalizing at that, right?
Of your restaurant. No, it's interesting.
They're discerning. Let me just say discerning.
Yeah, and that's a good word. I think what's really interesting is, for myself and Kori, it's almost like we enjoy going to a restaurant so much. There are certain people that we actually don't want to tell because we don't want to go to the bar and see them sitting there. We like having it as like our little spot, our little neighborhood spot. And the thing that I enjoy so much about it, which is so unique in Toronto, in my experience, is we don't have those type of restaurants like you would get more predominantly in other major cities like a New York or a Paris or a London, where you have these sort of neighborhood spots where the service is excellent and you know all the people who work there. That just doesn't really happen in Toronto with a real neighborhood experience, but like a high-end experience. And so I think that's, to us, what makes it so unique, other than our conversations and your wine selections and your art and your Nona working in the back and everything else that goes along with it. So I guess to anybody who's watching this, they can understand Kori and I really enjoy coming to your restaurant. I think that's the bottom line. But it's also really interesting to have you on the show because you've seen so much of Toronto and the evolution of Toronto. And in some ways, you are definitely on the front line of that evolution. And so it's really interesting to hear you talk about the transition in behavior that you've seen post-COVID versus the way your business was operating prior to COVID, because you really are on the front lines of a lot of these type of shifts and changes. And so it's really interesting to hear your perspective on that. And maybe we can go a little bit deeper into that. I know we're jumping ahead on some of the line of questionings that we wanted to get into you, but maybe talk a little bit more about COVID and how that impacted your business and how that has changed your business in this post-COVID environment.
Absolutely. If I could just answer make one point. You mentioned you like coming to the restaurant and it's your hidden little gem. Thank you. What my mother adds, and my mother's there, is not unique. She just comes because she wants to help, and she wants to help me.
Yeah. It's amazing.
And it is in many ways, but really it's not. And this is what's important in the sense that all she's doing is helping. Now, this is what I find fascinating. She's there to help me, and it's perceived to be fascinating.
Yes.
I love that. Well, this is it. If one just does what is right or what they want to do, it's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's jump to COVID. You asked what the effects of COVID were.
Yeah. Well, let's take a step back. What was it like trying to keep your business operating? Like as a business operator, like what was that experience like throughout that period of time?
I delved into this in many ways, and if I have to be honest, and I have to tell you that COVID was the best thing that could have happened to me on a personal level.
Interesting.
Because it forced me, and business level, because it forced me to stop what I was doing, and I only held on to the things that were important to me, and I let go of everything else. I don't like the way it was done. I don't like the way they told us to do it. I don't like what happened to society at large, and in terms of everyone's response and comments to each other, blah, blah, blah. We can go on forever on that subject, and we will. But I love what happened. Because what I did as a result of COVID is I said, all right, I'm going to focus on one thing. I'm gonna say one thing, because hopefully if I say one thing, I might be heard. And the focus of what I do now is sourdough pizza. It's something I believe in. I work hard at it at home. I have all sorts of, I have a micro bakery at home, and I prepare everything at home in terms of the sourdough. And I express it at the restaurant in terms of pizza and bread. And so it forced me to do one thing and remove everything else that wasn't important. So from that perspective, I love what happened. I don't like what happened to society. I don't like what happened in terms of us being unable to communicate with each other. That's something that frustrates me, because what I said earlier is food was the way in which I communicate. And I find communication now broken, and it's incorrect. And one of the things that I have at the restaurant, and I think what makes people feel want to come back is, and I don't do anything, that's what makes it work, it's just allowing people to be. And I don't know how. I think I do that. I hope I do that. I don't know how, but I want people to be whatever you want to be and be comfortable. And comfortable means safe. Comfortable means serving you something that you enjoy. Comfortable means in terms of comfortable service. And it's that comfort that's important. And for some reason, at large, that comfort is, I don't know what happened to that comfort, to that ease, I don't know what happened to it.
Well, I can say with 100% confidence, that is exactly why we love coming to your space, because it feels like you're coming home and you're being well looked after by an extension of your family, almost like the family you never had, which is sort of a way of feeling safe per se, because that's what we're all seeking, is that comfort. And so I love that we can come there and you're like, Kori, I know exactly what glass of wine you love, and I'm going to find it for you and make sure you get something that works with your palate. We don't even have to look at the menu. We can dialogue about what we feel like. We can come in our sweatpants after a long day of work. We could come in, I don't know, a high-end suit or something after going to the theater or before the theater. Like anything goes, along with everyone else is there. And I've never felt judged once in your space by anyone, including the guests that are there as well. Whereas if you go to, let's say, King West or some of the other, or Yorkville restaurant, you definitely feel like you perhaps might be on display and everyone's watching what everyone's doing and ordering and eating. And that certainly barrier has dissolved in your restaurant. And I think it's really interesting what you say about how we're communicating with people. And there's this disparity in terms of us connecting with people post-COVID, which I agree with. And actually, in fact, we had one of our clients and friends who's a psychiatrist that works at Mount Sinai on the podcast last week. And she was just talking about the COVID itself, and wearing the masks created even more distance between people. And we almost trained ourselves to become fearful of others. And even though the masks have been removed and COVID is no longer per se, that feeling of fear of other people and being close has somehow even assimilated more into our community and culture, which I thought was really interesting.
Absolutely. The restaurant is the ultimate distillation of community. You can eat in your own kitchen. You don't have to come to my kitchen, but you come is to be with others. And you want to be in a place where you are comfortable. Ultimately, the most comfortable place is your home, hopefully, and your spaces. Why? Because everything is laid out in a way that's most comfortable. Well, I try to do the same. And honestly, I don't do much other than make it comfortable for me and sharing that with everyone else. So there's not much there in many ways. And that's what's interesting is that comfort has been removed for everything you mentioned. And it's interesting in how it's translated in terms of the restaurant business. And that's why I had to focus. I said to myself, okay, what am I going to say to the society at large now that we're all in terms relatively uncomfortable with being together? What am I going to say to everyone? Well, say one thing. Make one thing, do it excellent, so that communication can go further. And there is the sourdough aspect. I think discomfort it starts, and I don't want to get political here because I'm not a political expert, even though I have my own views. Let's talk about the city.
Okay.
And is the city comfortable? Let's use the word comfort because I'm comfortable talking to you and sharing my views. Why? Because I feel that I can share it for all the reasons, non-judgmental, etc. Let's talk about the city. Is the city comfortable? Well, if the city is comfortable, it would be nice, and people would want to come. I said the other day to a customer, I said, "Thank you very much. Good evening. Thank you for coming." And I said, "By the way, where are you coming from?" And they said, "Mississauga." I said, "You came to Bar Mercurio from Mississauga?" And I wanted to hug this person. Unbelievable. How did you do it? They came from Mississauga. They got on their car. They drove into Toronto. I don't know how they drove into Toronto. They found the parking. They parked somewhere. They felt they weren't going to get penalized, or they were able to navigate the parking system and park somewhere, not get penalized. And they came to eat and then decided, I'm going to drive all the way back home. And I thought to myself, wow. I said, you're unique, but we're not unique in this sense, because when I'm for example, in London, England, I have no problem jumping onto the tube and going anywhere for an experience. But I don't think that necessarily happens in Toronto. People are not ready to come from Etobicoke or Woodbridge or somewhere else, jump onto the tube and get excited to go somewhere else. And we have to ask ourselves, why?
Oh, it's so true. Even if we have to go to the East End for dinner, let's say St. Lawrence Market or perhaps Gerrard Street East, Ralph and I are like, oh my God, we have a dinner.
Yes.
Oh, it's on Gerrard Street East. It's going to take us like at least 45 minutes to get there. We should probably leave an hour before. One of us should drive because we don't want to have to take an Uber because the Uber will have no idea where it's going. And like, we're just like, oh my gosh, like I really want to try this place, but I don't really feel like going that far. And the commitment just seems just overwhelming that we just often stay very local so that we can either walk there or, take a quick Uber just so we don't have to suffer in the Uber very long.
So the city in and of itself doesn't foster an open arms approach and say to the people, please come, please come here. That's definitely not the message. Not the message I'm hearing. That's a problem. And we can go on. People, why can't one of the most beautiful things is they're one of the most. I hate speaking this way. Well, I'm going to do it anyways. What the hell? One of the most beautiful things is by getting a compliment from someone that seldom gives them. So, for example, if a coach were to say to a kid, that was really good what you did, this kid is going to go home and eat all the chocolates in the fridge because this kid is excited. But if this kid gets a compliment from a coach that gives them to everybody, this kid is not going to go home and eat all the chocolates. Here's my point. When I grew up, there was discourse and it was open and free. It was, you had the full range of expression. You had all the praise and, unfortunately, all the criticism. But that was big amount you get. That was a big communication. You got everything from the other person. It's what you get from ultimately your parents. Your parents will give you, in a perfect world, all the love and all the criticism in an honest and in a way that's positive, etc. But you get the full range. Now, because now we have this is the range of our communication within here. And so it's empty.
I agree.
And what are we doing? That's why I communicate with one simple message. Come and have the best pepperoni pizza in town. Good. And I keep on saying this one little thing. Hopefully it penetrates. One, because it's hard. This is the range you have of communication.
Very interesting, because for you, your theme is communication. Like Absolutely. that is for you, your everything, and then everything ripples out from there. And just food happens to be the primary way that you choose to do it. And I think it's such an important way to try to connect with people, because, especially if you look after COVID and you look at the effects of social media, the way, if you're whatever you believe, that's what social media keeps reinforcing and taking you more and more extreme. And so because of that, now we live in a society where people are at extremes and there are no middle grounds. And it doesn't matter if you are, I'm using the US because it's more extreme than Canada, but if you are a Republican can't look at and say, well, I'm not a Democrat. I don't believe philosophically in the way they look at the world, but it doesn't mean Democrats can't have good ideas. It doesn't mean you can't say I'm a Republican, but those three ideas by the Democrats, those are actually really, really good ideas. Or, you know what? I'm a Republican, you're a Democrat, you see it this way, I see it this way. We're Americans first. Let's figure out some type of a solution. There's none of that anymore. Everything is so polarized into one camp or another camp. And you can use COVID, you can use the vax, you can use all kinds of different ideas or philosophical outlooks, but everybody is so much in their camp and does not like the idea of having to think outside that camp or having to communicate in a way that's outside of their narrow perception of the world and the way the world works. And it's interesting the way you talk about pizza, because pizza goes through all of that. A Republican, a Democrat, a vaxxer, a pro-vaxxer, an anti-vaxxer, like all of that, it doesn't even matter, because you're communicating at a far more base level that does not really require debate. It just requires sensory experiences that people can all relate to, because everybody does speak food. It is a very universal thing. And so I can see how in this world, in this post-COVID world, something like that, if you're a passionate person and communication is really your number one way to perceive the world, why that would be such an important and amazing way to communicate with people and try to bring people together at a time where it's just not happening. It's very interesting.
It's one message. I'm saying one thing, and it's basic. And I joke around, but I'm serious. I make the best pepperoni pizza in town. Okay, so I use pepperoni. Yeah. I happen to use Iberico from Spain, which is really good. Blah blah blah. But I'm saying one thing. I'm making one communication, and I'm hoping it filters through, irrespective of who you are, right? So whether you're a vegetarian, you can have it. If you're a carnivore, you can have it. It's fermented by sourdough, therefore it's healthy. Blah blah. So I'm making one communication. What's interesting is that we almost are not striving. Going back to our previous conversation, we're not striving to win the World Cup. When the World Cup is on, we have this one tournament. We have nations behind, irrespective of who you are. A whole nation. Doesn't matter whether you're tall, short, black, white, orange, green, educated, non-wealthy. I don't care who you are. You're behind this one nation to win. One. We're not behind anything now. I don't know. It's like we don't care no more. And that's why I brought up the analogy of the World Cup. And pizza, in a sense, is like the World Cup. Anyone can have it.
Everyone
as long as it's really good.
Yes.
As long as it's really good, anyone can have it. There's my communication.
I think people are too afraid to have an opinion, though. I think people have opinions. They're just too afraid to put them out there. And when you reference the fact that our communication has become more narrow and narrow and narrow, is that kind of going back to comfort. People only feel comfortable communicating in this box because they are trying to be neutral at all times. And then relating it back to the pizza, it's just like a very neutral place to be. Everyone loves pizza. We all enjoy pizza. We talk about our favorite pizza. It's what we've all been eating. Like, I kind of get it. Everything's just kind of narrowed down to one simple thing because we're all too fearful to have a position, to be expressive, to have a debate, to argue with a friend, to see things from a different lens, to not be on side with your parents' point of view or your siblings' point of view or your boss's point of view or whatever it is. And then we're all just, again, communication, community, and safety just keeps getting retracted and retracted and retracted to the point now that we're all just living behind these screens and, judging people from afar or maybe trolling from afar or participating in an online debate, but like to sit down with heart over a glass of wine and some pasta and, a really good lamb shake, I'm just making this up, at your restaurant and then debate about all of this in person just does not happen anymore. People are too afraid.
Well, ultimately, if you come to my house, which is the smallest kitchen or the smallest restaurant possible, that's you have a very intimate, open debate. Now, how do you do that at large? Right? Is interesting. I want to share with you just very quickly when I became aware of this. I was best man to a dear friend of mine in England, and I wrote a speech the day before, and there was an argument ensued between the couple.
Okay,
but it worked out. My dear friend is
Was it your speech?
No, I think it wasn't my speech this time. The groom got into some kind of an altercation with the bride's sisters, and something had happened, and that tension was alive at the wedding. And I'm about to give my speech, and we're at a private club, and the tension was tight. I had to weave something in. I had to grab my pen and I had to alter my speech, and I did. And here's how I altered it. I said, why is it? And I asked the question as I'm speaking. This is the part I inserted. Why is it that the people that we love, why is it that the people we love, we give the full range of our expression?
Mm-hmm.
The people that we love get all the love, but if we really love them, they have to get the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And I weave that in to kind of just recognize what had just happened. And here's my point. If we love someone, we give them the full honesty, everything. And all of a sudden, now we're forced to give this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what kind of communication is that? What are you doing? Don't. I want everything of you. I want you to tell me how ugly I am. Start with that. Don't start telling me that you love my long hair. Right? I want it all. That's the kind of guy I am. I was raised that way, in brutal honesty. You want to know who my mom was? Brutal honesty. It is so refreshing. It is so wonderful because it's not just the criticism. It's the immense praise. It's everything. And when you swim in these waters, it is so beautiful.
Mm-hmm. It's so
Honestly.
true. When it's so true how maybe it's a safety thing again. Not that that's necessarily the theme, safety and comfort, but I think the people that you know the best, you feel that you can express those wide range of emotions and points of view. And as an example, people are always like, oh, Kori, you're so happy all the time. You're like the most positive person I know. And I'm like, I actually have like a really bad temper. And they're like, I know. They're like, you have a really bad, and I'm like, I actually have a really bad temper. And they're like, I can't even imagine you having a bad temper. I'm like, no, the people that know me well, the people
I
that
can't even imagine. Could you imagine? I can't even imagine that range of you, Kori.
well, Ralph can attest to it
Oh,
because
it exists. It's out there.
I know because
Out there.
That's what makes it beautiful.
it's there. Like my sister could attest to it. My parents, Ralph, probably those are the only four people that actually have really seen the extremes of that disposition. And it goes to a very dark place. But I agree. The people that love you the most and the people you're closest to do get to see those range of emotions. Otherwise, mine is very much that part of me is very tightly tucked away in terms of the presence of most people, I would say most of the time. So
let's connect it to the restaurant. You come to the restaurant because it's comfortable. Well, what makes it comfortable? It's that complete range of honesty in terms of what I do. I try to give you the complete range of honesty culinarily.
Yes, you do.
The complete range of honesty. And therefore, I have to be open to, this is terrible, Joe. Okay. I'm getting better at that, by the way. Slightly. But this is terrible, Joe. All right, I got to accept that.
Like somebody could say that about your food.
If someone were to say that, I have to accept it. Am I always not? I challenge them if they're wrong, but I have to be open to it. But what makes my restaurant comfortable is a completely open range of culinary communication in terms of its honesty.
Yes.
And therefore, and if I'm communicating one thing, it's easy for me to be honest because I'm saying one thing more or less, and therefore I have to be completely honest. That I can't hide behind any other dish or chef or idea or here it is, and therefore you try it and you are completely honest. I find that interesting.
Yes.
So I have a question for you.
Please.
As a small business owner, as a restaurateur, where you have an exceedingly high failure rate, pre-COVID, pre-inflation, pre-everything, looking at how long you've been in the business and how successful you have been over the years, knowing that over the last 3 or 4 years, the challenges of doing what you do have only increased probably, I would say, 25-fold. Thinking about COVID and the pandemic, thinking about inflation and how you manage that while keeping your costs in line. And at the same time, just touching upon the city, seeing rates of crime rise, seeing all the parking basically being stripped away in front of your restaurant, talking about parking earlier. It seems like the bar just keeps getting raised higher and higher and higher against you in the type of business that you're in, which is already a business that seems high failure. Like if you ask the rate of failure challenges your business or restaurant would have faced in 2019 versus what it's facing today, I would say it's probably elevated 12-fold. So what is it like trying to operate a business and try to overcome all of these challenges that are constantly being just thrown and lapped level on level and level on top of you?
That's interesting. The first is in terms of inflation and prices. I do all the shopping. So I go and I choose my product and I so that I control it and I understand everything that's coming into the restaurant from a cost perspective.
So I understand that, but like I go to Kori and I, when we go shopping, we go to like Loblaws or whatever, and it's like $6.99 for a little pack of blueberries. Like we see it when we shop for ourselves. I know it's different when you're shopping for a restaurant, but still, when we shop for ourselves, we've seen our costs go up 3x maybe in terms of our cost. Like every time we go to Loblaws, a bag of groceries is going to be $100 no matter what we put into it.
No matter what we buy, it's always 100.
I go to Starbucks, it's $10 no matter what I do now.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And my pricing in terms of menu at the restaurant is honest. That is, I don't think it's exceedingly expensive. I don't think it's
not.
exceedingly inexpensive. I think it's an honest price, and we try to keep it that way.
Yes.
And we keep the operations very tight. In terms of we don't overspend and lose and close all the windows so no air escapes. In terms of labor costs and waste. And the truth is it's an experiment. We're still rolling with this. It's imperfect. It's new. People's spending is a little different. The customer base is very different. The prices are much higher. All these variables lend itself to a new. You have to take a new approach and see what happens. So the jury's still out in many ways in terms of what's going to happen in the next 6 months, next year, 2 years, 3 years. I don't know. What I've decided for me personally is, again, I repeat, keep the message simple. Do one thing, do it very well, and you can control that one thing. I'm exaggerating, it's much more than one, but you can control it. So the menu gets a little tighter versus getting a little bigger. The labor gets a little tighter versus getting a little bigger. So you do much more than you did before. I don't have the layers of management, and I don't have the maitre d', I don't have the sommelier, I don't have the exclusive bartender. So you jump onto more roles. And then you see what happens. So the jury's out there, to be honest with you, in terms of how do we survive the costs. While it is true that it's been a very punitive experience the last 3 or 4 years in terms of COVID. Undoubtedly, the customers disappeared. In terms of the city, the construction on Bloor Street was punitive. Lack of parking is punitive. The subway system, I heard, is a disaster. I go in there from time to time. That's punitive. You mentioned Uber seldom works. I hear this more and more often. It's good. That is punitive. We're in this punitive phase. The prices are punitive. The conversations are punitive. Everything is, and so I instinctively don't like punitive. So I take the opposite position. Well, notwithstanding everything that's happened, how do we still serve the best pepperoni pizza in town and make it affordable, if you will, and serve it because you mean it, irrespective of all this punitive. Maybe that's what makes it work, is the fact that notwithstanding all of this, somehow it's perceived as non-punitive. I don't know, but definitely we're in a phase where it's, I don't know. Punitive was one way I would describe it. When the city decided to enact these, we're segueing into another conversation, and if I overdo it, please tell me. We're now into bike lanes, and you're speaking to an avid cyclist.
Yes.
Yes. You are,
and you start putting bike lanes on Bloor Street and every street, and because you want to promote these bikes. And then there's a bike lane. Then there's on Bloor Street, there's a concrete meridian between the bike lane and the actual road. So now when the car parks, the driver has to be careful that the transport doesn't take him out, because between the car and the lane, there's no space. And I'm wondering, where is the wisdom? Where is the wisdom behind this? What are we doing? Do we need bike lanes everywhere? Have you asked everyone if we wanted bike lanes? I know why you want bike lanes, because you want to get rid of cars. Are you sure you want to get rid of cars? Are you sure we want electric cars? Are you sure we can afford to have all of us electric cars? Are you sure by having electric cars, we're not destroying nature and the environment? Are we sure about all these things? We're like, it's incredible. And so again, it's, bike lanes. Like, I want to understand the wisdom behind this. A bike lane in January at -20. I want to understand it.
Yes.
I want to understand the wisdom behind spending on snow removal on the bike lane in January. I want to understand the wisdom. I want to understand the wisdom why a cyclist can't unclip for a pedestrian when they're in front of them. Why the cyclist has to have the gall and sound his or her alarm for the pedestrian to leave the bike lane. I want to understand the wisdom behind that. Amongst the fact I want to do other things to that person that honks the bell ad nauseum towards the pedestrian that's trying to cross the bike lane. I want to understand why. Tell me why. Tell me why.
And that reminds me are an avid cyclist. Like, I just want everyone to be very clear. Like, you ride every weekend, like hundreds of kilometers, and so are very pro cyclist, but it's just the infrastructure piece and how it's been managed and our tax dollars on top of that that makes you question this whole thing.
We did a podcast where we had somebody who actually runs an advocacy group trying to take off of major arterial roads. And he talked about the way it's penalizing not just small business, but also emergency response, because now we're down to one lane each. And it was just choking traffic where we're in a city where we just don't have adequate secondary transportation. And he looked into a lot of the data that some of the advocacy groups were using to support the need to have bicycle lanes on arterial roads. And basically, they would only take data from May to September, and they would only collect it on days where it wasn't raining or the temperature wasn't at an extreme high or an extreme low. And so the data that they're using is being very, very much manipulated by a small interest group that's getting the city to move in a direction that they would prefer the city to move in. But it's happening very much under the radar, and to a large extent, just doesn't seem to make sense if you take into the fact that we have winter 6 months of the year here, just as a starting point for the conversation. So we definitely hear you. And, we live not too far off Bloor, and we feel for all the small businesses that are just making it impossible for anyone other than somebody who lives in walking distance to come to their establishment.
Totally.
I went to a hardware store not many years ago, and bike lanes were put in front of this hardware store. And I went up there and I spoke to the one of the managers. And I said, "How do you feel about the bike lanes in front of your store?" "Oh, we love them." And I said, "Well, if I buy this ladder, it's got to go in my car, and I can't park my car. So how am I going to buy this ladder?" There was like a complete acquiescence to this acceptance of bike lanes, irrespective of the fact that if I can't buy the ladder in a store because I can't put it anywhere. And I'm thinking, what are you guys doing? Why is it? And this is the problem. There is no honest, because you need honest feedback, right? So if I tell you that I'm tall and beautiful, you have to tell me, "No, Joe, you're short and ugly." You have to be honest with me. And we don't provide that honesty because we don't have that communication with others. So what I should have told this person, "Listen, you are an M. M means moron." Why? Because I cannot park my car and take this 12-foot ladder and park it. I'm definitely not going to bring it on my bike.
No, but you will drive to Home Depot where you can park for your car at the parking lot, but outside the city.
But I'm at fault because I was dishonest with this person by not telling him he's a moron. Well, I didn't give him the right feedback, the honest feedback. I wasn't a good coach to tell him, "You can't play on first line yet. You got to go practice." And this is where I'm at fault. And I think, and honestly, and I say this, I think we have to start there. And that's why I love, and I'm just going to tell you, I love what you do, both of you. We have to be honest in terms of communicating with the other person. I was not honest with this store manager by telling him, "You're a moron. I can't take this 12-foot ladder and put it on my bike. I need parking. You have to advocate for parking." Why? Yeah. Because if you don't, we can't spend in your store.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then we're going to what you said.
A big box.
Yes.
And how much more fluorocarbons are you going to use driving from your house to the Home Depot in Mississauga or North York versus being able to drive around the corner and load it into your car?
Correct.
It's utter madness.
Yeah, I don't get it. I'm puzzled. But again, I blame myself in terms of, and I'm being, somewhat sarcastic here, but yeah. I didn't provide the right feedback. Now, partly I didn't provide it because I thought that, well, it'd go on deaf ears.
Yep.
So I'm wasting my time.
True.
I didn't feel that I was the person was open to my feedback, even though I started the conversation by asking, "What are your thoughts on?" I felt that it was a closed conversation. No, bike lanes are the right things. End of the conversation. No, lockdowns are the right thing. End of the conversation. No, that's the wrong person. End of the conversation. You hear what I'm saying?
Totally. We hear you.
I think Ralph and I have always had very successful and long lasting relationships with our real estate clients because we are very ruthlessly honest and transparent with all of them about the process. And we've never inflated pricing. We always are very respectful of what the process is going to be like behind the scenes and how emotionally taxing this can be for people, and very respectful of the fact that this is their largest financial asset and they need to really have a trusting relationship with both of us. And we have to really communicate about what's working and not working the whole way through. Just like the only way a relationship will thrive as a husband or wife or whatever kind of duo you're talking about is with that type of level of honesty. And so I think that we have been very fortunate to and educated enough and experienced enough to know that we can build those types of relationships with real estate clients and be completely frank with them from beginning to end. And if people don't appreciate or respect that, then that's probably not the right partnership for us to be a part of.
But we also have developed to live in a society where we are so fearful of being punitively, I don't know why I'd say punitive, just because I like the way you used it earlier, Joe, but treated in a punitive manner for hurting somebody else's feelings. And there is some type of a reward system in our society where people feel or will advocate for people who are hurt or offended, whatever that may mean, to be vindicated against the perpetrator of that. And so, as an example, we live in a school system where kids in elementary school, they don't keep score anymore when they play soccer because they don't want anybody to feel bad if they lose. Well, we all know that the world doesn't work like that. And as these kids grow up, they don't want to hear the truth. They don't want to feel something that would make them feel discomfort, which ultimately leads to growth if it's used in the right way. And so people are walking around who may have a contrary opinion or may want to take a different narrative than the than the environment that they're in, but they feel fearful of doing that because of the repercussions of doing something that may make somebody feel uncomfortable or hurt, whatever that standard is to that individual. And so we've developed a society where we have a muscle reflex where everybody's walking around trying not to do anything that could hurt anybody's feelings, even though that may be the truth. And to Kori's motions, that's just putting her back to everybody just living in their little lane. And going back to your piece, Joe, of communication, you're in the middle trying to communicate to everybody on a more universal level in a way to try and bring people together.
Well, if two of my taglines from my restaurant, again, I apologize for repeating this. Come get the best pepperoni pizza in town. Well, I'm making a statement. Really, this is the best? I'm opening up myself for you to say, this is garbage. This is not the best. I've had way better. I've made a big statement by saying, come get the best. Therefore, you could easily knock that peg because I made it, I said it. And then my other tagline is, get off the couch. Get off the couch. Go do something. Now, I play with it for me, it's on multiple levels. Get off the couch and come get the best pepperoni pizza in town, meaning don't use your Uber to order your McDonald's. I'm sorry, McDonald's, I apologize. I used to love McDonald's when I was like.
I worked at McDonald's.
I begged my mom to allow me to go to McDonald's.
It was the best.
Begged. I failed, but I begged. So now we're all on our phone, and I want to eat Indian. And what do you want to eat? I want to eat Italian. What do you want to eat? I want to eat French. Well, we're going to have a perfect meal. We've acquiesced and appeased everyone in this group by just going on our thing and clicking. No, get off the couch.
I agree.
Right? So I play because I love this. Get off the couch And I open myself to all the criticism in the world by telling you, come get the best pepperoni pizza in town. Because you could easily say to me, this is garbage, or this is not the best, or this is like third, or this is like fourth in the classification. Right. Because I made a big statement. I'm opening up myself. And we can't do anything now. We can't say anything.
No.
I can't handle it.
Tell me a little bit, Joe, about the aspects of running the business, behind the scenes of running like a busy, small restaurant downtown. Like, what are some of the things that happen behind the scenes that people may not know or think about when they come to your restaurant, or when they think about your restaurant, or even owning a restaurant, that you think would be interesting for people to know about what it is you deal with behind the scenes on a day-to-day basis?
Well, at this stage in my restaurant journey, for me, it's about continuously finding meaning. And I'm not just saying this because it's the right thing to say or it sounds right. And meaning in what I do, because if I find meaning, I can share it, because that's the only way it's honest. And it's a continuous challenge for me to find culinary meaning in my industry, because if I find it, then I can honestly share it. And I know if I honestly share it, it'll be well received. So that's my continuous challenge. So that's why, again, I've narrowed down what I do, so I can go a lot deeper into sourdough, into grains, and milling the things, and finding new ways of expression. So for me, the biggest challenge at this stage is to continuously find meaning, so I can share that meaning with others. And that is a challenge. Then you have all the other little things of, how do you find staff to stay, and not necessarily stay because they're incentivized economically, because they stay for some reason they like to be there. So that's the other challenge. How do you share with patrons? Oh, no, you got to come now and have the best pepperoni pizza in town. You can't have that fish that I used to serve 4 years ago. So remove that from your radar. And
Don't remove the calamari, please.
Yeah. Well, there's some pegs we need, because that's the only way we know how to get there. So I'm going to leave certain pegs on the ground.
Yeah, don't you move, don't you touch that calamari.
Right. So certain pegs will stay, but you gotta some kind of, right. So truthfully, is continuously finding meaning in what I do. Interesting enough, there are a lot of restaurants, notwithstanding opening up. So I'm told more than I go to. And I get it. It makes complete sense, because if you're a kid, there's lots you want to say. So there's lots of meaning, whether it's valid or not is irrelevant. There's lots of meaning. But once you've done it for a long time, how do you find meaning and therefore share it? Because you have to share it. And this is the challenge. So the newcomers, this part of it is relatively easy, because they have a lot. There's a lot there that has to come out. For guys like me, it's difficult. But I still have a few things that are coming out that you don't know, that are coming to the restaurant. I'm not getting rid of the calamari peg. That thing is so deep in the ground, you're gonna need a crane.
Okay. All right, good. And the 1,000-year-old bread, grains.
And not myself at 1,000 years old. I agree, though. I think when you've done anything at a high level for a long period of time, keeping that passion there and finding that purpose and that fuel, you're constantly having to look for what that seed is, and also acknowledge that it's going to change over time, and that what fueled you 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it's going to evolve and change, because you've grown and evolved and changed. And I always notice this about myself, that when anything becomes generic or repetitive, or I feel like I don't have a little bit of fear, or something it means I'm not growing. It means I'm not stretching myself. And that means it's time for me to up the echelon, or have a new goal, or to innovate somehow. And I think that we've known you for over a decade already. It's very apparent to us that innovating and looking at your business as an artistic format is really what you're doing. And so I love the fact that you're like, I just need to find the fire. And if I can keep the fire going, even if it's just a small little Kindle right now, I'll be able to withstand whatever is thrown at you, whether that's bike lanes or more construction or higher taxes or more inflation or a change of patronage, all of these things, I could see that you need to have that fuel. And as an artist, because you are also an artist, like a painter as well, it makes sense to me that you see your business from that perspective. That makes so much sense. And that would be very hard to do all the time.
I think if you don't have meaning or significance, or if you can't find meaning in what you do, you shouldn't be doing it.
Well,
And I guess that's my eternal challenge.
yep.
And I'm fortunate enough to be brutally honest with myself. And it's terrible. It's terrible. Thank God no one. Thank God the camera's off when I'm honest with myself. But that's the only way I can be is with that brutal honesty. And there's a little bit of wind behind that sail, but I can move forward with that. I definitely can.
That's awesome.
So, a neighbor of mine was at a retreat in India. There are a bunch of CEOs that come together, and it's about finding meaning in what they do. I found that very interesting. Well, how do we find meaning in what they do? And part of it is being free to let go of everything you have.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we do that? That's quite challenging, because really, right? If we can let go of everything we have, we are completely free. I thought that was
truth.
Interesting.
That's the truth. Preach, Joe, preach. And if you were to go back and start a business, start your restaurant all over again, at this part of your journey now, knowing what you know, is there anything you would do differently? Or if you could talk to your 29-year-old self, what would you tell? Yeah, that's a better question. If you could give your 29-year-old self, just after the day after you signed the lease, if you could give 2 sentences and go back in time and write it down, send it to yourself, what advice would you give?
Ask yourself, what you love about your industry, and make sure you can do that the best possible. That is, if I would have recognized back then that my love was bread, I would have stopped. I would have stopped and had a more deeper understanding of what bread is, and move forward on that. So I didn't ask that question.
Amazing. That's a great answer. Kori, do you have any other questions for Joe?
I have a couple of questions because I'm really just personally curious about this. Joe, if you were to take yourself out for dinner in Toronto, where would you take yourself for a really great meal and a glass of wine? Do you have another spot that's tucked away somewhere that you would love to share with our viewership?
Unfortunately, I'm the worst person to ask, because the old saying, "The shoemaker's children have no shoelaces," the restaurateur doesn't know anything, because after I'm restaurateuring, I go into this cocoon and I disappear. So I don't know. I know in terms of cuisines, what I like outside of mine is Indian, because Indian clears my palate. It cleans my palate of my biases, of all culinary biases, and it resets it on a different plane. That's why I like Indian.
I love that. And I can relate to that, because a lot of people say to us, "Oh my gosh, you just must love looking at properties online." And what? I had absolutely zero desire after a day of work to just go scrolling around on realtor.ca looking at properties, or just being like, "Oh, I'm just going to pop into this open house and check out this house." Like, I have absolutely zero desire to experience real estate outside of real estate when we're not on the clock. So I completely appreciate that, and have also a very high respect for Indian food. And Ralph and I would say, for sure, we would say Italian first, followed by Indian. So we're aligned on that. You must have had an amazing meal somewhere in the world. And I know you go to Italy quite frequently. Is there a spot in Italy that you would go to if you were vacationing with your family?
So again, I'm immensely biased.
Okay.
For me, the best food is that which is closest to its source. the best cherries or the best figs I have had are off the tree in a fig orchard in my hometown in Italy. So I'm not exaggerating when I say this. And this is a common experience. And I would love to share this if I could with others. It's challenging, but I would love to just to stand in the orchard, take your own fig and eat it. So if we can stay as close as possible to that source, therefore you have the best cuisine. And so moving forward, the best cuisine would be at my grandmother's, where everything came off the farm that she had, or my mom's place. These are the best cuisines. And as we move further away from that, where some of the places I've had, there are many restaurants I've had great meals in Italy and in Toronto and everywhere I've gone to. But to me, ultimately, the best food is closest to its source. Don't remove yourself. And literally taking the fruit off the tree and enjoying it. And the summer we did that. My brother got married in Italy, and there were a bunch of us. And I insisted on one day that my uncle bring us to this fig orchard, even though figs this year was a bad year in Italy because it overrained, so we had a bad harvest. I insisted that he bring us to this place where we all exited the cars and we walked, and there were endless amount of trees, and you had to find some had more fruit than others. I will tell you, it's an experience that to me it's what drives me, because once you understand that pleasure, and then you say, how can I take this pleasure, put it into a box, and share it with Ralph and Kori? I don't know how. I haven't, but how can I take this pleasure and share it with you? And that's, if I can do that, I mean, I think I've hit something.
Well, we're happy to go to Italy with you anytime. We're completely
Just throw that out there. Yes.
Just talk.
Next summer.
Sure.
Yeah.
Love to.
Joe, is there anything else that you feel like you want to add as we conclude things today? Anything else, any other messaging about what you do in your wonderful restaurant that you want to share with our viewership today?
I want everyone to be honest in terms of praise and criticism. And I want everyone to feel free that they can share that. Share it. It doesn't mean you have to be rude and obnoxious. Share it. Yes. People want it. They're dying for that honest, full range of criticism. Don't give me this. I don't want white Wonder Bread. I want the range.
I think that's an excellent answer. I love that. Well, we're concluding another engaging episode of the Toronto Real Estate Podcast today. We are super grateful to Joe Mercurio for giving us an insider look at Bar Mercurio, a true cornerstone of Toronto's culinary scene and the best pepperoni pizza you can find in the city. And I will give it full props, 5-star review for sure. Joe's insights have certainly informed our understanding of the restaurant journey and highlighted the many layers that contribute to the city's dynamic culinary scene. Joe, what is the best way for people to find you and book a reservation so that they can come test out your pizza themselves? Where can everyone find you?
barmercurio.com.
Amazing.
Go to reservations.
And you book on Open Table, or what does that connect you to?
It's my own platform.
Oh, your own platform. Okay, I love it.
Thank you.
Well, I will be sure to add that in the show notes for our viewers so everyone can come and test things out. But just make sure that viewers that you don't take Ralph and my seats at the bar, because we're often found there on Saturday nights. So I know that we always have a spot in your restaurant. So thank you so much for being here.
Always.
Ralph, would you like to take us home?
Yeah, Joe, I'd love to be honest in my praise and say that it was amazing having you on the show. We love your restaurant. Anything that we can do to support you in your restaurant, we're always there for you. We think you're the best. And we love our open communication and conversations that we have while sitting at the bar with you. And this is just another extension of that, a natural one. So thank you once again. It's been great having you here. And thanks everybody for tuning in today. If you love our content, like our content, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. And if you have any feedback, good, bad, ugly, please be sure to comment in the section down below. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Joe. Thank you both.
Thanks, Joe.
Have a good one.
Thank you. Un abbraccio. Ciao.